The climax of my father-in-law's 60th birthday party had arrived. The leather sofa in the living room was packed with relatives, and the shag carpet was littered with shredded, colorful wrapping paper. I held a half-full glass of sparkling wine, my finger on the remote, casting the family photo album from Paul's phone onto the 85-inch TV on the wall. Everyone was looking at pictures from our trip to Yellowstone last month when the screen flickered, and a black and white ultrasound image popped up right in the middle. The date in the bottom right corner was clearly yesterday's. The patient's name was printed on it. Chloe. At that moment, Chloe was standing by the kitchen island, eating blueberries. As the college roommate of Paul's younger sister, she'd been living in our basement for the past 6 months. The living room went dead silent. My aunt was the first to react, immediately clapping and shouting congratulations. Paul, who had been holding a knife to cut the cake, jerked his hand, and a big chunk of red velvet cake splattered onto the Persian rug. Without even grabbing a napkin, he lunged for the coffee table to snatch the remote. Everyone knew I'd had my fallopian tubes removed 2 years ago. I stared at the tiny black dot on the screen and swallowed. The rim of the champagne glass clinked against my teeth with a soft sound. Paul's fingers frantically pressed buttons on the remote, but the image froze on the ultrasound, only getting bigger. I set down my glass, my heels crunching over the wrapping paper. I walked straight to the TV stand, bent down, grabbed the thick black power cord, and yanked it out. The screen went black instantly. The relatives were stunned. I turned around, pulling my lips into a perfectly natural smile. "Oops, I tripped on the cord," I said, brushing the dust off my hands. "That photo was from my cousin. Paul saved her electronic file. This TV is such a hassle. Let's just have cake first." The relatives let out a few kind laughs and then scattered to refill their drinks. Paul stood there, a fine layer of sweat on his forehead, his chest heaving. He walked over, draped his arm over my shoulder, and dug his thumb into my collarbone. "Honey, you handled that well," he whispered, his lips pressed against my ear. The party went on until 11 p.m. I stood at the door, helping my father-in-law into his wool coat and packing the leftover half-cake into his hands. Paul stood beside me, hugging and saying goodbye to every relative as they left. The moment the door closed, Paul let out a long sigh and slumped against the wooden door. "I'm going to shower first. I'm exhausted today," Paul said, yanking off his silk tie and tossing it onto the couch before quickly heading upstairs. I stood in the entryway, listening as the master bathroom door on the second floor clicked shut, followed by the sound of the shower running. I turned and walked to the study. In the bottom shelf of the bookcase, inside the safe, were all my important documents. I entered the 6-digit code and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Tucking it under my arm, I left the study and headed toward the basement entrance at the end of the hallway. The wooden stairs to the basement creaked with every step. I slowed down, descending one step at a time. The sound of the shower was muffled upstairs, leaving the basement eerily quiet. A sliver of yellow light seeped through the crack under Chloe's door. I didn't knock. I just turned the knob and pushed it open. The room was thick with an intense perfume scent. Chloe was sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching her phone tightly. When she saw me come in, she jumped up and the phone hit the carpet. She was wearing a silk camisole nightgown, her belly slightly protruding. "Sarah, let me explain. What just happened on the TV?" Chloe stammered, her hands shielding her stomach. I closed the door behind me, pulled over a folding chair, and sat down. I tossed the manila envelope onto the small round table in front of Chloe. "No need to explain anything. You're pregnant, and the child belongs to Paul," I said, looking into her eyes. "Sit down. Standing isn't good for a pregnant woman." Chloe hesitated, then slowly sat back on the bed. Her eyes were fixed on the manila envelope, her fingers twisting the hem of her nightgown. "What did Paul promise you?" I asked. "He must have said that if you have this baby, he'll divorce me, move you into the master bedroom upstairs, and take over everything in this house." Chloe bit her lower lip and nodded. "And he told you he has a huge trust fund in his name, and that if he signs the divorce papers, this house and all his property will go to the two of you, right?" Chloe's head shot up, her eyes wide. I let out a soft sigh. extended my index finger, and tapped the manila envelope. Open it and take a look. Chloe leaned in, her trembling hands untying the string on the envelope and pulling out all the documents inside. They were a thick stack of property deeds and several bank transaction statements. Look at the name on top. This house, along with the lawn outside, is all under my name. It's my premarital property. I pointed to the bold black text at the top of the document. Paul doesn't have any trust fund. That so-called startup of his can't even cover the monthly office rent without me fronting the money. That Mercedes SUV he drives still has 36 months of payments left. Every monthly deduction comes from accounts under my name. Chloe flipped through the pages one by one. Her pace quickened, the paper rustling loudly. Her face gradually turned pale.
Impossible.
She murmured, her fingertips tracing the negative balances on the bank statements. He just bought me a $10,000 diamond necklace last month. That credit card supplementary card is under my full control. I looked into her eyes. When next month's bill comes out, I'll cancel that card directly. The moment I sign the divorce papers, Paul will have nothing. He'll be kicked out, buried under a pile of high-interest debt. As for you, my gaze dropped to her belly. You'll be stuck with a bankrupt man, pregnant, and renting some cheap apartment without even heating. The two of you will have to rely on welfare to buy baby formula. The documents in Chloe's hands fell onto the table. She covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking violently. He lied to me. Chloe's voice cracked with tears. He said everything was arranged. I stood up, walked to the front of the table, and leaned on it with both hands, looking down at her. Paul lied to both of us. I said each word deliberately. He used my money to buy you gifts and used the child in your belly to cover his own lies. He treated us like two fools he could easily fool. Chloe looked up, her eyes filled with terror. What do I do now? She grabbed my sleeve tightly. I pulled my arm free and gripped her wrist instead. I'm going to make Paul go completely bankrupt. If you still care about the child in your belly, let's make a deal. You keep playing the clueless good girl, going upstairs every day to pressure Paul into marriage. You keep asking him for money, demanding designer bags, insisting on the best maternity center. You make him keep borrowing money to fill those bottomless pits. Chloe froze. And then? She asked. Then I'll teach you how to legally drain every last cent from him and transfer it into your own private account. The day he's completely ruined, we'll throw all the truth in his face together. The water upstairs stopped. Paul had finished showering. I picked up the brown envelope from the table and retied the string. At breakfast tomorrow morning, I want to see you acting coy with Paul, asking him to buy you that latest crib. I tucked the envelope under my arm. The greedier you act, the more he'll think you can't live without him. Can you do it? Chloe took a deep breath, wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes. She looked at me and nodded firmly. I'll make him buy the most expensive one, Chloe said through gritted teeth. I pushed open the door and walked back down the wooden stairs to the first floor. The living room was littered with wrapping paper. I stepped over the mess and climbed to the second floor. When I pushed open the master bedroom door, Paul was just drying his hair. Honey, is Chloe asleep? Paul came over and wrapped his arm around my waist. She's asleep. I leaned into his chest. She said she wants to go shopping tomorrow. I think she's been in a good mood lately. At 7 the next morning, the kitchen was filled with the smell of frying bacon. I stood at the stove, cracking 2 eggs into a frying pan. The hot oil sizzled. Paul came down the stairs in a dark blue suit, tying his tie as he walked to the coffee machine to pour himself a black coffee. The door to the basement opened. Chloe came out in a white knit cardigan. She pulled out a bar stool and sat right next to Paul. She reached out and touched her flat stomach. Paul, I couldn't sleep well last night. Chloe rubbed her hand against Paul's arm. The basement is too damp. It's terrible for the baby's development. I checked, and the south-facing guest room upstairs has the best sunlight. I need to move up there. I also saw a $3,000 crib that I want you to order for me today. The coffee Paul had just taken a sip of sprayed directly onto the marble countertop. He coughed violently, his face turning bright red. Flustered, he grabbed 2 sheets of kitchen paper towel and wiped the coffee stain vigorously, his eyes darting toward me. I plated the fried eggs on a white porcelain dish and set it on the dining table. Pulling out a chair, I sat down, picked up a knife and fork, and cut into the bacon. Chloe has a point, I said, putting a piece of bacon into my mouth and chewing slowly. The basement is way too cold. A pregnant woman needs sunlight. Paul, as the older brother, you should take care of your sister's roommate. Paul froze. He clutched the wet paper towel in his hand, a fine layer of sweat forming on his forehead. He turned to look at Chloe, speaking through gritted teeth in a low voice. Chloe, that guest room is currently occupied by Mia. Mia is my biological sister. She's unemployed right now and can't afford the rent for her downtown apartment at all. Chloe completely ignored Paul's plea. She poured a full glass of milk into her cereal bowl, picked up her spoon, and tapped it against the bowl's edge. That's your problem, Paul, Chloe said, staring straight at him. You need to figure it out. The fetus's health comes first. If you can't even handle a room, I wouldn't dare have this child. Heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. Mia came down in a pink coral fleece pajama set, her hair a mess. Yawning, she walked to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of orange juice. What room? Mia twisted off the cap, took a big gulp, and turned to look at us at the table. Paul stood up abruptly, walked over to Mia, and reached for the orange juice bottle in her hand. Mia, listen to me. You've been living here for free for 6 months, Paul said, his voice laced with barely concealed irritation. You need to learn to be independent. I'll transfer you $2,000. Go find an apartment downtown today and clear out the guest room by this afternoon. Mia's hand, holding the orange juice bottle, stopped midair. Her eyes widened as her gaze darted between Paul and Chloe. What gives you the right to kick me out? Mia slammed the orange juice bottle onto the counter. Juice splashed out, spattering onto Paul's suit cuff. Chloe only paid rent for the basement. You're throwing me out for an outsider? Are you crazy?
Mia.
Paul raised his voice, grabbing Mia's shoulders firmly. I'm telling you to move out. Take the money and leave now. Stop yelling here. Mia shoved Paul's hands away and stepped back 2 paces. Her chest heaved. She turned and glared at Chloe, who was sitting at the counter, eating her cereal slowly, without even looking up. I get it now, Mia said through clenched teeth, pointing a finger at Chloe. You two are up to something. That ultrasound photo is definitely fishy. Mia, pack your stuff, I said, setting down my knife and fork and tapping the empty plate with my fork. The crisp sound cut off Mia's words. Since Paul agreed to cover your deposit, go rent a decent apartment. Don't make things hard for your brother. Mia stared at me in disbelief. She bit her lower lip, her eyes instantly reddening. Without another word, she turned and stomped heavily up the stairs. The door to the second-floor guest room slammed shut with a loud thud, shaking the decorative picture on the wall. Paul let out a long sigh, leaning against the fridge door. He looked down at the orange juice stain on his cuff, yanked off his tie in frustration, and tossed it on the floor. I've got 3 meetings today. I'll transfer the $3,000 for the crib to you. Buy it yourself. Paul grabbed his briefcase, didn't even touch his breakfast, and pushed open the front door without looking back. Only Chloe and I remained in the dining room. Chloe put down her spoon, picked up a napkin, and wiped the corner of her mouth. She turned to me with a dazzling smile. This trick you taught me works like a charm, Chloe whispered. He's really scared I'll use the baby to threaten him. I stood up, collected the empty plates, and put them in the sink. I turned on the faucet, watching the water wash away the grease on the plates. Remember our deal? I said, picking up a dish sponge and scrubbing the plate's edge firmly. This is just the beginning. Mia won't let this slide. She's home all day with nothing to do, so she'll be watching your every move. Let her catch some clues, but don't let her get any solid proof. Got it? Chloe nodded. She picked up her cereal bowl and walked lightly toward the stairs to check out the south-facing guest room that would soon be hers. At 10 in the morning, I carried a black plastic bucket to the backyard to water the flowers. I attached the hose to the faucet and turned on the spigot. Water sprayed over the rose bushes with a soft rustling sound. The window of the second-floor guest room was open. Mia's head poked out. She held her phone up, shouting loudly into it. That woman is definitely up to something. She just waltzed into my room to take measurements. Paul stood there like an idiot defending her. Mia yelled into the phone, yanking at the curtain. I'm not moving out this afternoon. I'm going to search her basement. I'll find proof of whatever she's scheming. Paul must have some leverage she's holding over him. I stood by the rose bushes, holding the hose. Water streamed over the green leaves. I looked up at Mia's angry face. Without a word, I quietly moved the hose to another pot of hydrangeas. 2 in the afternoon. I sat at the computer in the study, the screen showing the surveillance footage from our front door. Paul's car was in the driveway. He was back. He carried several large moving boxes. I pushed open the study door and walked out. In the living room on the first floor, Mia sat on the sofa with her arms crossed, a pink suitcase at her feet. Paul dropped the boxes on the carpet and strode over to her. I sent you links to rental websites. Why haven't you left yet? Paul pointed at the door. I found a receipt for a $10,000 diamond necklace under the mattress in the basement. Mia jumped up, pulled a crumpled receipt from her pocket, and slapped it against Paul's chest. The purchase date is last week. The buyer is you. You bought this parasite such an expensive gift, but you want me to move out to some crappy apartment? Paul's face went pale in an instant. He snatched the receipt frantically, crumpled it, and shoved it into his pants pocket. You went into her room to steal? Paul's voice trembled. I was just getting back the curling iron I lent her.
Mia shouted.
What are you hiding from Sarah? Where did this money come from? I stood at the stairwell landing, watching them argue. Chloe was on the second-floor hallway, holding a glass of warm water, looking down at the scene below. She turned and exchanged a glance with me. I nodded slightly. This drama was just beginning. Paul gripped the crumpled receipt tightly. He glanced at the stairwell landing and hissed at Mia in a low voice. Shut up. What do you want? Mia extended her right hand, palm up. Paul immediately unzipped his black briefcase, pulled out a checkbook, and quickly wrote a number. He tore off the check and slapped it into Mia's palm. $5,000, Paul said through gritted teeth. Take your luggage and get out now. Don't mention the necklace again. Mia looked at the number on the check, folded the paper twice, and tucked it into her jeans pocket. Paul grabbed his bag, pushed open the front door, and walked out. The heavy wooden door slammed shut with a loud bang. The living room fell completely silent. Mia didn't go upstairs to the guest room to pack her bags. Instead, she turned and walked straight to the basement at the end of the hallway. The wooden stairs creaked under her steps. In the study on the second floor, I put on my black noise-canceling headphones. The computer screen showed a live feed from the basement surveillance camera. Mia kicked open Chloe's door. Chloe was crouched on the carpet, stuffing clothes into a red suitcase. You liar, Mia said, striding over to the bed and grabbing the pink toiletry bag Chloe had left on the pillow. She yanked it open, the zipper giving way. Mia turned the bag upside down, and everything inside spilled onto the bedsheet. Toothpaste, lipstick, perfume, and a few small white pill bottles. Mia picked up one of the bottles and held it close to read the label. Hormonal medication for regulating menstrual cycles. And this, she picked up a half-used blister pack, regular birth control pills. Chloe, there's not even a single bottle of basic prenatal folic acid in your bag. Chloe jumped up and lunged to grab the bottles from Mia's hand. Mia shoved her hard, and Chloe fell back onto the mattress. You're not pregnant at all, Mia said, pointing down at Chloe. That ultrasound image is completely fake. Paul fell for your trick. Chloe's face was pale, her hands gripping the edge of the bedsheet. Give me back my medicine. Paul just gave me $5,000 as hush money, Mia said, pulling up a folding chair and sitting down. He's so stupid he'd even kick out his own sister for that fake baby in your belly. Since he's that dumb, he must have even more money. Let's work together. Chloe froze. You keep playing the pregnant woman and ask Paul for money. Mia picked up an eyebrow razor from the table and twirled it between her fingers. We split whatever you get. Otherwise, I'll take these pills right now and go find Paul at his company. Then you won't get a single cent, and you'll be packing your bags and getting the hell out. Chloe stared at the pill bottle in Mia's hand. After a full minute, Chloe nodded. In the study, I watched the two women on the screen sealing their deal and clicked the left mouse button. I exported this 10-minute surveillance video and saved it onto a silver USB drive. Chloe had betrayed our agreement. This was exactly what I expected. Greedy people always go for the quickest payoff in front of them. 7 in the evening. The chandelier in the dining room was on. I walked out of the kitchen carrying a huge glass baking dish and set it down in the middle of the long dining table. Inside the dish was a steaming roast chicken, surrounded by golden potato chunks. Paul came home right on time. He walked into the dining room, saw the scene at the table, and stopped dead in his tracks. Mia and Chloe were sitting next to each other on the same side of the table. Mia was even using a spoon to help Chloe serve corn chowder. The two were chatting and laughing. Paul, go wash your hands and come eat. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down, picking up the metal knife and fork. Paul looked confused as he walked to the sink to wash his hands, his eyes constantly glancing toward Mia. He dried his hands, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from me. Mia, didn't you go look at the apartment this afternoon? Paul cut into the potato on his plate, testing the waters. Chloe thought the basement really was too cold, Mia said, taking a sip of soup and smiling at Chloe beside her. We talked it over. I'm giving Chloe the south-facing guest room on the second floor. I'll move to the basement. That way, we can all keep living together as a family. Paul's fork clattered onto the porcelain plate. He looked at Mia, then at Chloe. Great. I put down my knife and fork and wiped my hands with a white napkin. Since everyone's here, I have an important announcement to make. All three turned their heads to look at me. I pulled a thick blue folder from my black handbag next to me and laid it flat on the dining table. This is a draft of a newborn trust fund agreement. I pressed my palm down on the folder. Paul, we've been married all these years without having a child. Since Chloe is carrying your flesh and blood, I decided to accept this child. I'll contribute a commercial property and $1 million in cash to this trust fund. Paul's eyes went wide instantly. His breathing became extremely heavy. Sarah, you mean it? Paul stood up abruptly, bracing his hands on the table. Of course. I opened the folder and pointed to the signature line on the last page. As long as the medical notarization process is completed, this money will belong entirely to the soon-to-be-born baby. As the mother, Chloe can withdraw $10,000 a month for living expenses. The soup spoon slipped from Chloe's hand into her bowl, splashing a few drops of yellow broth. She and Mia quickly exchanged a glance under the table. There's only one condition for the agreement to take effect. I closed the folder, folded my hands on the table, and stared straight into Chloe's eyes. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, Chloe must go to the St. Mary's Advanced Private Hospital I've designated. You need to undergo the most comprehensive prenatal checkup, blood draw, the latest 4D color ultrasound. The medical records must be directly encrypted and uploaded by the attending physician to the Foundation's notarization system. As soon as the system approves, the $1 million will be in the account by tomorrow afternoon. The dining room fell dead silent. Only the glass baking dish was still making faint sizzling sounds. Paul excitedly walked around the table and threw his arms around my shoulders. Sarah, you're so generous. He turned his head and looked at Chloe, frozen in her seat. Chloe, I'll drive you to the hospital at 8 tomorrow morning. Chloe's face was as white as a sheet. Her hands were gripping the edges of the wooden chair so hard that the veins on the backs of her hands bulged. I've had a bit of a cold lately, Chloe stammered, her eyes darting around. Can we postpone the prenatal checkup until next week? Absolutely not. I picked up the glass of ice water beside me and took a sip. The lawyer has to fly to Europe on business tomorrow afternoon. If we miss tomorrow morning, this trust fund won't be able to restart for another 6 months. You don't need to worry about the cold at all. That hospital has the top internists in the entire state, and they'll treat you as well. Under the table, Mia stomped hard on Chloe's foot. Mia forced a stiff smile. Sarah's right. How could a little cold hold up something as important as $1 million? Chloe, you have to go tomorrow. Paul nodded repeatedly, walked back to his seat excitedly, and tore into the roast chicken with big bites. I watched the cold sweat beading on Chloe's forehead as I picked up my knife and fork to continue cutting the meat on my plate. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, that state-of-the-art 4D ultrasound machine would show everyone clearly her completely empty belly. Tomorrow, I was going to make sure Paul watched his million-dollar dream shatter on the floor of the most upscale private hospital lobby. 9:30 in the morning. I drove my silver sedan into the underground parking garage of St. Mary's Advanced Private Hospital. I parked in the spot next to the elevator entrance, pulled the key from the ignition, grabbed the blue folder from the passenger seat, and pushed open the heavy door. The revolving glass doors on the first floor of the hospital lobby kept spinning. The smell of disinfectant mixed with air freshener hit me. A huge electronic display hung in the center of the lobby, the red numbers just jumping to 9:40. Paul's black SUV was parked in the temporary spot outside the emergency entrance. Paul was helping Chloe, step by step, up the 3 marble steps outside the main entrance. Mia followed behind them, clutching a black leather handbag tightly, her eyes fixed on Chloe's back. Chloe walked extremely slowly. She wore a loose beige trench coat, both hands pressed firmly over her flat stomach, her legs trembling slightly. Her face was as pale as paper. "Chloe, take it slow." Paul gripped Chloe's right arm tightly. "The ultrasound room is on the 3rd floor. After the blood draw and the ultrasound, we'll head straight to the cafe across the street to sign the papers. The $1 million will hit the account right away." Chloe stopped, turned her head, and glanced back at Mia. Mia pulled a small note from her black bag, waved it in front of Chloe, then rubbed her thumb and index finger together in a money gesture. Chloe looked away, staring at the highly polished marble floor in front of her. Suddenly, she let out a loud cry, shook off Paul's hand, and fell to the right. She tumbled down 2 marble steps, both arms wrapped tightly around her stomach, curling into a ball on the floor. "My stomach," Chloe screamed with her eyes shut, her voice echoing through the lobby. "It hurts so much. The baby, my baby." Paul's briefcase hit the floor with a slap. Several documents spilled out. He lunged over, dropping heavily onto his knees beside Chloe. "Doctor. Someone call a doctor." Paul's hands hovered in the air, his fingers stiff, completely afraid to touch Chloe. 2 nurses from the reception desk rushed over with a wheeled stretcher bed. They lifted Chloe onto it, pushed through the double glass doors, and hurried into the emergency room down the hall. Paul, drenched in sweat, scrambled up from the floor and ran after the stretcher. Mia grabbed her bag and followed quickly. I walked to the long hallway outside the emergency room, found a blue plastic chair, and sat down. I opened the blue folder on my lap, pulled out a black pen, and drew a huge black X on the signature line of the last page. The red warning light above the emergency room door was on. The only sound in the hallway was the hum of cold air from the ventilation vents. Paul paced back and forth, his leather shoes clicking on the tiles. He yanked at his hair with both hands, messing up his styled look. Mia walked up to Paul, stretched out her right arm, and blocked his path. "Paul, Chloe just miscarried," Mia said, lowering her voice and leaning close to his ear. "That $1 million trust fund is completely gone. What about the money you owe me? Write me an IOU right now, convert your share of the trust fund into $50,000 in cash, or I'll spill everything about your scam." Paul stopped, his eyes bloodshot as he glared at Mia. "Are you insane?" "Chloe's in there getting emergency treatment." Paul shoved both hands hard against Mia's shoulders. "Get lost. Stay away from me." Mia stumbled backward, her back slamming hard against the white wall of the hallway. Gritting her teeth, she pulled out her phone from her pocket and lit up the screen. The handle on the emergency room door turned. A middle-aged doctor in a white coat with gold-rimmed glasses stepped out. He held a clipboard with a metal clip. Paul rushed over immediately, grabbing the doctor's white coat collar with both hands. "Doctor, how's my baby? Is the miscarriage serious?" Paul shouted, spit spraying onto the doctor's glasses. The doctor frowned, yanked Paul's hands away, and stepped back. He pushed up his glasses, looked down at the clipboard in his hands. "Sir, please stay calm. The doctor tucked the clipboard under his arm. The woman inside doesn't have a single fertilized egg. She shows no signs of pregnancy whatsoever. Her endometrial thickness is completely normal for the premenstrual phase. She only scraped the skin on her left knee. A nurse is putting a Band-Aid on it right now. You can take her and leave. The hallway was dead silent. Only a fly buzzed around the fluorescent light tube overhead. Paul took a step back, his back hitting the blue plastic chairs. His mouth hung open, his eyes locked on the doctor's face. The curtain to the emergency room was pushed aside. Chloe walked out with her head down. A white square Band-Aid was stuck to her left knee. She clutched the hem of her trench coat, not daring to meet Paul's eyes. I closed the blue folder on my lap and stood up from the chair. I pulled a black phone from my trench coat pocket, tapped the screen to open the audio player, and pressed the volume button to max. The sound of the basement surveillance recording echoed clearly through the quiet hallway. You're not pregnant at all. That ultrasound is completely fake. Mia's sharp voice came through the phone speaker. Keep pretending to be pregnant and ask Paul for money. The recording continued. Split the money with me. Otherwise, I'll take these pills to Paul's company right now. The progress bar reached the end. I turned off the phone screen and slipped it back into my trench coat pocket. Paul turned stiffly, looking at Chloe, then at Mia leaning against the wall. The muscles in his face twitched violently, veins bulging on his neck. You too. Paul gritted his molars, his voice squeezing out from deep in his throat. You teamed up to scam my money. Paul lunged at Mia like a wild animal. He grabbed her hair and yanked it down hard. Mia screamed, her black handbag dropping to the floor, cosmetics spilling everywhere. She clawed wildly at Paul's suit jacket. Chloe panicked and turned to run toward the lobby. Paul reached out with his left hand, grabbed the collar of Chloe's trench coat, and yanked her to the floor. Give me my money back. You two vampires. Paul roared, kicking Chloe's fallen bag with his leather shoe. The bag flew across the floor and slammed into the wall. 4 hospital security guards in black uniforms ran in from the lobby entrance. They rushed over, 2 grabbing Paul's arms, the other 2 pressing his shoulders, pinning him against the hallway wall. Paul's cheek pressed against the cold tiles as he cursed loudly. Mia sat on the floor, clutching her messy hair, crying loudly. Chloe curled up in the corner, trembling, her arms wrapped around herself. I tucked the blue trust fund folder under my right arm. I stepped forward, walked up to Paul, and looked at his face pressed against the wall. Paul, deal with your massive debt problem properly, I said calmly, my voice flat. Tomorrow at 9 a.m, my lawyer will meet you at your company with the divorce papers. I turned around, walked in my heels down the bright, wide hallway toward the entrance. The automatic glass doors slid open, and sunlight hit my face. I tossed the blue folder with the X mark into the green trash next to the door, walked to my car, and opened the door. 11 a.m. I sat in the silver sedan, parked on the curb across from Paul's company. I lowered the window halfway. Paul came out carrying a brown corrugated cardboard box, pushing open the company's glass door with his shoulder. The box was heavy, tilting his body to one side. A withered pothose plant, a few blue plastic folders, and a black metal stapler peeked out from the edge of the box. He was fired. The video of the fight in the hospital lobby had spread all over the internet. His boss told him to get lost. Paul walked to the outdoor parking lot on the street. He reached into his right suit pants pocket, then suddenly stopped in his tracks. The parking spot number 12 in front of him was completely empty. His black Mercedes SUV was gone. I looked down at the phone resting beside the steering wheel. A vehicle tracking app was open on the screen. A red that was on the map stopped at the entrance of a used car dealership on the south edge of town. Yesterday, during the fight in the hospital hallway, Paul's jacket had fallen on the floor tiles. Mia picked it up. She took the car keys from the pocket. She sold the car to the dealership for cash and ran off. Paul slammed the cardboard box onto the concrete sidewalk. The pothose pot shattered into several pieces, scattering black soil and white pebbles everywhere. The stapler bounced off and landed at the edge of the road. Paul pulled out his phone, pressed his fingers hard against the screen, and held it to his ear. He was calling the loan shark company. He needed cash to hire a lawyer. I rolled up the window, started the engine, and drove home. I walked up the steps to my front door in high heels. A brand new silver combination lock had been installed on the door. I reached out and entered the 6-digit new code. The lock clicked open with a crisp sound. I pushed the door open and walked inside. 3 people were sitting on the living room sofa. 2 court bailiffs in uniforms and a bank debt settlement officer in a gray suit. A thick stack of documents lay on the glass coffee table in front of them. I went to the kitchen, poured 3 glasses of ice water, and set them on the coffee table. A yellow taxi pulled into the driveway outside. Paul jumped out of the car. Behind him came a locksmith in work clothes, carrying a huge metal toolbox on his shoulder. Paul strode up the steps. He reached for the door handle. The door didn't budge. He slapped the wooden door panel in frustration, then turned to the locksmith and pointed at the lock. The locksmith set down the toolbox and pulled out an electric drill with wires attached. I reached out, grabbed the metal handle on the inside, pressed it down, and yanked the door open. Paul froze on the steps, his hand still raised in midair. "Sarah, what right do you have to change the lock?" Paul stepped up, trying to push his way inside. "I brought a locksmith. I need to get into my home. I need to get money to hire a lawyer to sue you." I stepped to the side, clearing the doorway. 2 tall bailiffs walked over from the living room and blocked the entrance. The debt settlement officer in the gray suit picked up the documents from the coffee table and stood behind the bailiffs. Paul's gaze went past the bailiff's shoulders and took in the scene in the living room. The muscles in his face twitched, and he slowly took a step back. "What are you people doing in my house?" Paul pointed at the documents in the settlement officer's hand. The officer opened the folder, pulled out a default notice stamped with a red official seal, and held it out to Paul. "Mr. Paul, last month you borrowed $200,000 from a loan shark company. You used this house as collateral," the officer said, pointing to the signature on the paper. "Property records show that this house is entirely Ms. Sarah's personal premarital property. You are suspected of forging the collateral. The loan company sold your debt to our bank yesterday." Paul's mouth hung open, the flesh of his cheeks sagging. "According to the high-interest default terms you signed," the officer continued reading from the document, "we are now legally seizing all high-value personal assets you have left in this house." I turned and pointed toward the stairs. "His dressing room is the first room on the left on the second floor. Inside, there are 30 custom suits and 5 luxury watches. In the study safe, there are also 2 gold bars he bought with company funds." I reported the locations of these items in a steady voice. The bailiffs nodded, put on white gloves, and walked up the wooden stairs to the second floor. Paul tried to rush into the house. The debt settlement officer extended his arm and forcefully pushed him back onto the steps outside. Seeing the situation, the locksmith picked up his toolbox from the ground and ran back toward the waiting taxi. Paul stood on the steps. The bailiffs carried large black plastic bags, hauling items down from upstairs one trip after another. Paul's custom suits, still on hangers, were stuffed into the bags. His Rolex watch and laptop were placed into transparent plastic evidence bags. The bailiffs emptied out all of Paul's personal belongings. The settlement officer checked a box on the list and handed Paul a pen. "Sign here. The money from auctioning off these items will be just enough to cover your penalty interest. As for the principal, we will continue to pursue it from you." Paul's hand trembled violently. He couldn't hold the pen. It fell onto the steps and rolled into the grass. "What about my car?" Paul looked up, his eyes fixed on me. "I still have a Mercedes. That car is worth $80,000. I pulled a printed transaction record from a used car dealership out of my pocket and threw it at Paul's feet. "Mia used your spare key to sell the car for $30,000 in cash." I looked him in the eye. "She took a long-distance bus and left this state yesterday afternoon." Paul's legs gave way, and he dropped to his knees on the marble steps at the front door. He covered his face with both hands. "What about Chloe?" Paul lowered his hands, his eyes bloodshot. "Chloe still has the diamond necklace I bought her." I picked up a local newspaper from the coffee table, flipped to the news section, and slapped it against Paul's chest. The newspaper had a photo printed on it. "Chloe, wearing handcuffs, was being escorted by 2 police officers into a patrol car. St. Mary's Hospital sued her for medical fraud and destruction of expensive medical equipment. She couldn't afford bail, and the necklace was already confiscated by the police. Paul stared at the photo in the newspaper, collapsing onto the steps. He propped himself up with his hands, gasping for breath. 2 bailiffs walked out carrying bulging black bags. The debt settlement agent stuffed the default list into Paul's suit pocket. The 3 of them headed toward the white van parked on the curb. I stood at the doorway, watching Paul. Paul lay sprawled on the steps, his fingers digging into the gaps between the marble slabs. I reached out, grabbed the door handle, and pulled the heavy door shut. The lock clicked with a crisp sound. I turned around, walked into the kitchen, picked up the sponge by the sink, and slowly wiped down the marble countertop. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone screen lit up on the solid wood coffee table in the living room. With a persistent vibration, the screen displayed a landline number from the local police station. I picked up the phone, pressed the green answer button, and held it to my ear. Kenneth. Sarah, this is the downtown police precinct. A gruff, low male voice came through. Your husband Paul is here. He's involved in a serious financial dispute and a physical altercation. He needs you to bring his driver's license and passport originals to verify his identity. He has absolutely no identification on him. I'll be right there. I hung up, grabbed a thick manila envelope from the entryway cabinet, and pushed open the front door. I drove my silver sedan on the road, heading downtown. A light drizzle was falling. The windshield wipers swung back and forth, making a steady, rhythmic rubbery sound. I parked in the open-air lot across from the police station, pulled the handbrake, and took out the key. I opened a long black umbrella, stepped over puddles on the ground, and pushed open the heavy double-glass doors of the police station. The lobby had a strong smell of disinfectant mixed with cheap coffee. One of the fluorescent tubes overhead was flickering nonstop. On the blue plastic bench, to the right of the lobby, sat 3 people. Paul's expensive dark blue custom suit was covered in wrinkles, and the right cuff was completely torn open, revealing the white shirt underneath. Mia's hair was a tangled mess, her hands cuffed with silver metal handcuffs, sitting at the far left end of the bench. A female officer in uniform stood behind her, holding a clear plastic evidence bag. Chloe sat at the far right end, her beige trench coat stained with dust and mud, a worn canvas bag at her feet. None of them could sit still. Paul kept leaning toward Mia. Hand over the money from the car sale. Paul reached out and grabbed Mia's hoodie collar tightly, veins bulging on the back of his hands. That was my car. You took $30,000. Give me the money now so I can hire a lawyer and pay off the debt. Mia twisted her shoulders hard, trying to break free from Paul's grip. She lifted her chin and spat directly onto Paul's suit jacket. Dream on, Mia screamed, her voice echoing through the lobby. Chloe stole every cent of that money. She went through the soles of my shoes and my backpack while I was asleep at the motel. Not a single dollar left. Chloe jumped up from the bench. She clutched the worn canvas bag tightly. Paul, you liar. Chloe raised her right foot and stomped the sharp heel of her high heel onto Paul's leather shoe. You promised to buy me a big villa. You faked an ultrasound report and fooled everyone. Now I'm facing a huge lawsuit from St. Mary's Hospital for damages. I need that money to pay the fine and save myself. Paul let out a painful yelp, quickly bent over, and covered his foot with both hands. He gritted his teeth and looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Suddenly, he reached out his right hand and slapped the bottom of Chloe's canvas bag hard. The zipper on the canvas bag was completely broken. Under the impact, everything inside spilled out with a clatter. Several rolls of green bills held together with rubber bands, mixed with lipstick, a powder compact, and a few loose coins and keys, scattered across the gray floor tiles. Coins rolled on the ground, making crisp metallic sounds. The 3 of them stared at the money on the floor and lunged at it at the same time. Paul dropped to his knees, frantically scooping the bills toward himself. Mia, still handcuffed, slammed her shoulder hard into Paul's back. Chloe screamed and clawed at Paul's fingers gripping the cash. Enough. The fat officer behind the duty desk slammed his hand on the wooden surface, producing loud bangs. Everyone stepped back. Hands on your heads, and get down. Two tall patrol officers rushed over, grabbing Paul and Chloe by the arms, forcibly separating the three of them and pressing them back onto the blue plastic bench. The money on the floor was kicked into the corner by one of the officers. I folded my black umbrella, hooked the handle over my left arm, and walked in my heels to the front desk. I pulled open the string on the brown paper bag and slid Paul's driver's license and passport through the bulletproof glass window of the reception counter. The fat officer picked up the documents, tapped a few keys on the computer keyboard, and checked the information on the screen. Paul heard the sound of heels and spun his head around, spotting me standing at the front desk. He lunged out of his chair like he was grabbing at a lifeline, rushing over to the bulletproof glass window. His face pressed flat against the glass, his hands slapping the countertop, leaving two clear, sweaty palm prints. "Sarah, you finally came." Paul gasped heavily, his breath fogging up the glass. "Hurry, and pay my bail." Mia got caught using a fake ID to buy a long-distance bus ticket, and Chloe's involved in theft and medical fraud. "Just get me out with the money, and I'll cooperate with the cops to press charges against both of them. We'll get all the money back." I looked at him calmly. I reached into my trench coat pocket and pulled out a printed divorce agreement, along with a black pen. Through the semicircular gap at the bottom of the glass window, I slid both items onto the metal counter in front of Paul. The frenzy on Paul's face froze instantly. He looked down at the bold black title on the paper. "Sign it now." I pointed to the blank line at the bottom right corner. "You're forcing me to divorce at a time like this?" Paul's hands trembled as he gripped the paper, making it rustle. "You want me to walk away with nothing? I still owe the loan sharks. You're taking the house and all the money, and you're completely abandoning me?" I didn't even bring my checkbook. I crossed my arms and looked him in the eye. "The loan shark company took over all your debts yesterday afternoon. Sign now, and I'll leave immediately. If you don't, I'll take your passport and driver's license right now, and you'll stay in this lobby as an unidentified suspect." Paul turned his head and looked at the corner. Mia and Chloe were staring at him with venomous eyes. Mia made a throat-slitting gesture at him. If Paul stayed here with no backup, those two would definitely pin all the fraud charges and stolen money on him alone. Paul swallowed hard, his atoms apple-bobbing violently. His trembling hand grabbed the black pen on the counter, uncapped it, and scrawled his name forcefully on the agreement. The tip tore through the top layer of paper, scraping harshly against the metal surface. I reached out and pulled the signed agreement back through the gap. I took a careful look at the signature in the bottom right corner, confirmed it was correct, folded the paper neatly, and put it back in my trench coat pocket. "Sarah." Paul gripped the edge of the bulletproof glass window with both hands, his voice shaking, his eyes completely red. "At Dad's 60th birthday party last month, we were still watching the family photo album on the TV. We had a good home." I stopped, turned around, and looked at him. "That ultrasound photo that popped up on the smart TV that night, you were planning to use it to fool me for the rest of my life." I flicked some dust off the sleeve of my trench coat. "I sold that TV on a second-hand website yesterday afternoon." Paul's mouth hung open. He stared at me blankly, unable to say a word. His legs gave out, his hands slid down the glass, and he slowly sank onto the cold floor tiles. I turned around and pushed open the heavy glass door of the police station. The rain outside had completely stopped. The evening sunlight broke through the clouds, shining on the wet asphalt road, reflecting a golden glow. I walked to my heels toward my car. I opened the door, sat in the driver's seat, and started the engine. I turned the steering wheel, the tires splashing through a puddle, leaving the police station's entrance completely behind in the rearview mirror, and drove steadily toward the wide boulevard in the city center.